Greetings from our new video and channel. Greetings to everyone. I'm telling our listeners about the life of Maria Johnson today. Listen carefully. Hi there, I'm Emily. I live with my mother, who is precisely 30 years my senior but in better health, and I am a 50-year-old widow. I've been so worn down by my experiences that even my 80-year-old mother occasionally breaks down in tears when she sees me. I'll tell you about the string of incidents that have exhausted me today. My heart is already racing, and I'm not sure where to begin. I'm hoping I can finish it without sobbing. If you're ready, I'll get started. In life, picking the perfect spouse is crucial, isn't it? Because your life might be wrecked if you select the wrong spouse. I've spent my entire life searching for the proper mate using this reasoning. I lived in Chicago, so I met a wide variety of individuals, and I had a couple partners. I ended one relationship because he constantly asking me for money, I ended another because he told someone else she was gorgeous, and I ended a third because I heard an awful phrase. I had some very severe requirements. The person who was going to marry me had to be honest with me, not be in debt, and not show any interest in other people. I turned to my parents after realizing that I couldn't locate someone like that nearby. My parents enthusiastically asked me who I wanted to marry when I told them, "Mom, Dad, I want to get married." I turned to them and told them, "You will find someone because I couldn't. I have a few requirements. First and foremost, I want my spouse to be nice, not have any negative reputation, not burden me with debt, have a source of income, and be faithful." Without a doubt, this is the most crucial factor. After hearing what I had to say, my parents began searching for a suitable partner. I don't usually support arranged weddings, but I was left with no other option. 2 months later, I was approached by my parents, who informed me that they had located a suitable partner for me. I was overjoyed. At the time, I was 21 years old. The individual they located for me was Michael, and he was 26 years old. He managed an office as well. We met at a cafe in Brooklyn one Saturday after I agreed with Michael. The man Michael was tall and good-looking, a true gentleman of New York. I was highly cultured and courteous. We became engaged pretty fast, and we were married 4 months later. My parents were overburdened and grew really cranky. So, I was glad I didn't have to live with them. Michael purchased a lovely home for me and outfitted it with brand new furnishings. Our honeymoon was also ideal. We had a pretty happy marriage. I didn't even know how our first anniversary had arrived because the days flew past. That day, I was completely unaware that it was our anniversary. Everything was dark when I got home from work. I spotted my wife when I entered the living room. She had arranged the table tastefully, setting candles beside the dishes. In the candles' soft light, we had a delicious lunch. After that, we moved on to the second, third, and fourth years. It was obvious to us that something was lacking. Clearly, something was lacking. What was that thing? The kid. There was a missing youngster. We also needed a child. For 4 years, I never became pregnant in any way since my husband and I always utilized protection throughout our sexual encounters. We stopped using protection after our 4th anniversary because we wanted a kid. Despite our repeated attempts, we were unable to conceive. My mother-in-law and sisters-in-law are nasty, so they attempted to make my name infertile, even though my husband was a really decent man. They continued visiting our home and telling my husband, "Look, let it go, this barren woman couldn't give you a baby either." They shouted these things in front of my mother one day, and my mother lost it. She assaulted my mother-in-law and tore out her hair. My spouse and I both felt a great sense of relief. I visited a gynecologist after that altercation in an attempt to locate a medical professional or medication that may help me recover. At last, a physician recognized my illness and performed surgery on me. After the procedure, I healed quickly and fell pregnant 2.5 months later. When I found out I was pregnant, I was overjoyed because I was not bothered by the contractions, nausea, or stomach ache. My spouse was overjoyed, too. We were in a happy mood since my sister-in-law and mother-in-law had also quit talking gibberish. I became a mother at the age of 27, and we called our daughter Sophia. She is a very healthy and lovely baby girl. This is the name my spouse and I decided on. The name Sophia was very stunning. The hair of my beloved daughter Sophia was curly. She resembled a mermaid rather than a human because of her hazel eyes and sweetness. "Mom, I'm going to be a mermaid when I grow up," she would frequently tell me when she was younger. I was very careful with my daughter. I closely observed her school, her acquaintances, the classes she took, and even the pastimes she developed. My husband's behavior began to seem odd to me once my kid started school. When I lifted her up, he refused to feed her. I once granted my kid permission to go out when she requested for it. When my husband got home from work at 6 o'clock in the evening, I told him that our daughter had gone out and was going out with her friends. In a fit of rage, my husband hurled his coffee cup on the ground. "How are you able to tolerate this? Our daughter is a young child who belongs at home and at school. Allow her to study in her room if she is bored." "What nonsense are you talking about? This girl is in high school, she is 15 years old, and she is at the height of puberty." I turned to him and said, "Her grades are already very low. Give her permission to spend some time with her pals. You starve her and throw her clothes in the trash. Are you her father or her enemy?" I said. "Besides, isn't it enough that you are restricting her so much? If she received a 90 on the exam, she would be furious." My husband became even angrier after hearing these remarks, and we began to argue. I went to the bedroom and fell asleep because I couldn't take it any longer. The door was knocked on an hour later. My spouse was there before me as I got up to open the door. "Hello, Daddy, how are you?" my daughter asked, turning to face my spouse. "You should punish your room, it's off for a day, you won't be able to leave the house for a week, you won't go to school, you'll study on your computer," my husband replied, interrupting her before she could continue. I stepped in and informed my husband that what he was doing was wrong, but I was unable to communicate with him. My spouse had turned into a very self-centered and insensitive person. He was a perfectionist who was never content with anything, and he wanted my daughter to speak. My husband would ask, "Why didn't you spread it on this side?" If my daughter did so in front of him, he had become so misguided. He also started treating me with a great deal of disdain. We had a view of the sea, yet we were still connected. I considered divorcing him several times due to his conduct, but I was unable to do so since I had stopped my work and had no money saved. I decided to stay and persevere since I couldn't bring my daughter to my family because I would be a burden to them. I regret staying with my spouse because it cost me so much that I eventually lost my life. My spouse went mad the year my daughter was scheduled to take her university test, preventing her from leaving her room for days, weeks, or even months. To encourage her to study more, he offered her 6 hours of sleep a day and became irate even when she used the potty. No one took my repeated attempts to speak with my husbands and my family seriously. I was left alone by everyone. Thus, on that day of bloodshed, they arrived. 5 years ago, on a February day, I had to buy new boots for myself because my old ones were torn. I wanted to bring my kid with me to the mall, but my spouse wouldn't let me. "She must sit in her room and study," he urged. I regret not forcing my daughter to be there that day. My spouse was on the other end of the phone when it called while I was at the mall trying for shoes. When I answered the phone, he sobbed and said, "Where are you, Emily?" I started crying as he added, "I forgot to lock her room and she ran away from home." I said, "How should I know?" in a sobbing voice. "Don't bother her, and she won't flee," I said, hanging up the phone after leaving the house 2 hours prior. An hour later, my husband called to inform me that our daughter had died. I was happy that my daughter ran away from home because I thought she would go to my mom and dad and wait for me, but that didn't happen. I simply passed out in the midst of the shopping center and woke up in the hospital. I requested to visit my kid, but the nurses and orderlies refused to let me. They gave me a tranquilizer after I yelled and pushed. They gave me another tranquilizer after I assaulted my husband when he arrived to me. I also attacked my husband's family when I saw them. For 3 weeks, I was unable to move from my bed and simply slept without eating or taking a shower. My parents stepped in front of me and made me eat, but I refused. They simply stated that my daughter died in a road accident without even showing me how she passed away. After 2 months, I still didn't know anything. All I knew was that my daughter had been struck by a car while she was crossing a busy street. The arrangements for the funeral were handled by my spouse. Despite my desire to go, they did not take me on the day of the funeral. I could only visit my daughter's cemetery precisely 2 months after the burial. I returned to the hospital when I became ill there, but nobody was able to provide me with any information. I had to contact the universe over my daughter's passing and funeral since I was certain that there was some shoddiness in the company. I looked toward my husband's workspace. While he was in a meeting, I went to his office, unlocked his lockers, and looked everywhere but couldn't find anything. I was ready to walk away when I noticed a key with rose designs all around it. The rose-patterned box I had noticed in my wife's drawer sprang to me. As soon as I got home, I opened my wife's drawer. A piece of paper emerged as I opened the rose-patterned box. When I opened the paper, I was surprised to see that it was a letter. The suicide note written by my daughter. Every time I read the letter, I feel worse than if I were about to die, so I don't want to tell you what was written in it. Her father placed a lot of pressure on her, and she said in her letter that she would be saved by death. "Pardon me, Mom," she wrote at the end of the letter. Because of the life my spouse thought was appropriate for her, my daughter hurled herself from an overpass and committed suicide. They kept this knowledge from me for a long time after she was ripped to bits by passing automobiles on the road beneath the overpass. My daughter killed herself because that's what it was all about. I called my spouse as soon as I finished reading the letter. I informed my husband over the phone that a horrible incident had occurred and urged him to get home right away. When my husband got home, I yelled, "What is this?" while standing in front of him like a black basin and displaying the letter, condemned him to death since he was unable to even open his mouth. "I'm going to the police, whatever the hell you do," I then said. "I hope you are imprisoned and that you will not even feel at ease there." My wife tried to stop me, but I slapped her hard and went to the police. "I hope they take care of you inside." When the cops arrived at the house, my wife was supposed to be summoned in for interrogation. We repeatedly banged on the door, but nobody came. At last, police officers smashed down the door and went inside. My wife had committed suicide, and her lifeless corpse was inside. My spouse was dead when the paramedics and the building's neighbors arrived at my door 30 minutes later. Ms. Lale, I never felt sorry over my husband's passing. I hope he's currently blazing in hell. I did not take the property and salary that I received from my husband after his death. I am such a proud and honorable person. If the globe was owned by the guy who killed my daughter, I would prefer to live on a different planet. I didn't even go to my husband's funeral when it was held. I refused to allow them to bury my spouse close to my daughter. I was the only one who had succeeded in becoming my daughter's parent, thus I was the only one who would lie next her. I moved in with my family following the funeral for my spouse. They talked a lot at first, but I didn't go back to my husband's house regardless of what they said. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law were terrified of my husband's house once they knew I wouldn't go back there. A bastard who pushed his own daughter to commit suicide is not someone I would ever want to live with. I began visiting my daughter's cemetery daily. I went to the cemetery when I was upset and when I was depressed, and I spent every moment with her. I spent every time with my baby and spoke to her constantly. I disregarded the several individuals who advised me, "Your daughter is dead, you can't die with the dead, life goes on, get a job, get married again." I argued with everyone who said my kid had passed away. My kid is still alive and not dead. I still have a place in my heart for Sophia, who is 18. My heart belongs to her house. I used to live with my parents. My dad passed away from a lung ailment last year, may he rest in peace. Even if he has wronged me in a few ways, he is still my father. I now live with my mother and look after him, but I am the one who needs care since I am exhausted. I'm exhausted, Mrs. Lale, I'm sick of everyone and everything. Since suicide is a serious sin, I am unable to do it, else, I would be with my daughter at this very moment. God will grant me a nice and early death. Thank you. That's all. I appreciate everyone that listened, and I hope they all have a happy life. Yes, friends, I did share our listener Maria Johnson's traumatic life tale. Believe me, it was really painful for me to relate this tale to you today because, God, it hurts a lot to test anyone, even my adversary, by putting them through a child's suffering. I'm at a loss for words, and I'm not sure how to comfort you, Maria Johnson. I assure you that there is no way to adequately describe the events and situations you have encountered. They say that despite everything, life continues. Please go obtain psychological assistance and don't give up on yourself. Believe me, what you are going through is not typical, and I have no doubt that this scenario will consume you if you do nothing. But without a doubt, seek medical assistance. I can assure you that I am unable to say much more than that. You will also receive supportive notes from our listeners. I'm here if you, like Maria Johnson, have life tales, experiences, or things you can't tell anybody. Kindly get in touch with me. Goodbye, and stay with love.